raise his arms.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is being recorded and posted online. And yeah, welcome to the Web Performance Working Group. We had a discussion about meeting recordings, which wasn't recorded. And now we move on to the main event.
And the notes of that will be within the minutes later for anybody that wants to review it. And if anybody has any questions, they can contact Yov and I directly about that discussion. Next meeting 2 weeks from now on the 29th of April. Any problems? Okay. I did want to share one thing that came out of a community group. There is a new spec editors community group that was started up. Basically a discussion and friendly group for people that are spec editors. So for anybody here that is working on specs, you may or may not want to join and see how everybody can help each other out. But just wanted to share that link. And after that, Noam, did you want to take some time for fetch and HTML integration with the specs?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to present to you the work we were doing in the last 5 or 6 weeks together with Yoav and with the WebPerfWG folks. So the idea was to solve a longish technical debt of a resource timing and navigation timing, defining the processing model internally while the processing model actually is defined in fetch and in HTML, while the processing model in resource timing and in navigation timing was like a reflection of that, like a saying the same thing in different words and putting in when things should be measured as sort of an add-on to the other specs. And the idea of this effort, which is nearly at the end of my current tenure in it, you can say, contract, is to change that and to make it that instead of putting everything in those APIs and specifications, the metrics would actually be marked when they happen in the relevant standards, and later what the API specs would define is how they're exposed. So actually a lot of this is already in the editor's draft. I can, how do I do this? Present now? Yeah. In a window. Okay, I can't present cause all kind of permission issues. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so resource timing, for example, had a very elaborate process model that was talking about how each metric is measured. This has changed, and now you can see that all the different metrics are just a timestamp conversion from something that's called timing info. And timing info is something that arrives from fetch. Now, it's still quite easy to get to where it's measured by following the refs, but they're all now in fetch. So now we have a fetch timing info inside fetch that has all the different metrics. And we can see how they're actually measured, like redirect end time. We can go to the reference. And at a particular point in the fetch algorithm, it says, oh, now this is the redirect end time. So I'm going to mark it, which is more like also how the code works, how the implementation work. Usually there's some struct somewhere in a document loader or in resource loader, depending on your browser engine of choice. And later on, it's exposed by the API. The same goes for navigation timing. Yeah, like previous document unload timing, there was like the spec needed to define what previous document means, what it means to unload it. And here I can just go to document unload timing info, which is in the HTML spec. And there is a point in time where unload timing info is set, and there is and all these things about documents from other origins their unload timing shouldn't be measured. All of that is in the spec, and how it's measured is in the spec. This also interesting because it's uncovering a lot of issues. One issue that is in progress is what we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, which was the worker timing. So worker timing, an explicit spec of that which corresponds to what's happening in Chromium and Gecko is in review, and it's going to go in. So all of that is going to be explicit. A new issue that was uncovered is that it's not entirely clear what happens to network errors. Should they get a resource timing entry or shouldn't they? It's very difficult to put it in the fetch spec. Many things return a network error in all kinds of places, so it's difficult to say when is timing recorded for them. So that's a currently open issue. Yes.
Yeah. Well, just one quick question. Do we know what browsers currently do for those coarse network errors? Do we see entries for those, or?
So for coarse, yes. For other network errors, some yes, some no, which exposes a situation where the embedder can know that it's a coarse error rather than a different network error, which is probably not what we want.
Do we have use cases for having the network errors? I don't know if Nick or anyone else that uses resource or navigation timing would have an insight there.
Yeah, we certainly do for our RUM stuff, and we have a couple other open issues for other cases for capturing instances of non-200 level errors. Sorry, not 200 level status codes. I think at this point, most of the browsers are consistent in reporting most error cases in resource timing.
Right, but this is about network and not HTTP errors. So, so yeah. I think we agree that we want to report HTTP errors. Those happen after the course checks. And so the question is, do we have a use case for reporting course errors, right?
And other network errors.
Right. Because the easy solution, right, from my perspective, or, well, I don't know if easy, but like just not report them at all, right? If there's no use cases for them. I don't know how much breakage that would cause, though. That's why I'm wondering if there's people actually using these kinds of course errors to get visibility. Like, yeah, I don't
And
know.
there's some overlap with the reporting API here too, which can report on network level errors.
And another solution that came up was that they're reported always, but as if they were tau protected, which means the caller of fetch knows that they made a fetch and they know that there was a network error of some sort. So they can report the timing of the start and end timing of when they called the fetch and when they got the network error. And like there would be some entry, but it wouldn't expose anything the embedder doesn't already know. Anyway, I would. This is a discussion that spurred up from this, and it would be good to continue that on the GitHub issue. On the meantime, I wanted to have a master issue for this. However, this so far it spans 7 different repositories, so it's difficult to tell which repository should hold the metabug for all of the stuff that is about this. In the meantime, I created a Google Doc where you can see all of this. But right now, there are quite a few things that are done and a few things that are in review. Yeah, how do we handle network errors is here. I can share the document. Big work that is still required is big work that is still required is that fetch itself does not report to resource timing. It just marks the timings, the different metrics, and it's up to the caller to say, okay, this is my initiator type, and I'm going to mark it. So there are about 15 callers. This is also sort of how it works in the implementation. Because the caller needs to decide whether the reporting needs to happen before or after the load event, which is very caller specific, for example. And the initiator type is something that comes from the caller, and fetch doesn't know anything about it. So there needs to be work on the HTML spec and CSS spec to, and other specs like Beacon, to say, okay, at this point, actually report the resource timing for this resource. And this work is pending, and there's a big meta issue for it. I think I think also several issues that were fleshed out are already fixed, which is nice. They actually came from working on this. For example, the fact that the tau was that the SWAP protocol was still reported for tau protected, and a few little privacy security issues were just popped out from doing this work. This is it for me. Yoavi, do you want to add something? Or just questions?
Nothing to add other than the fact that I'm super excited about this finally landing after many years of this dragging on. So thank you for that work. Amazing work.
And I wanted to say, like, let's try to keep it clean. Like, you know, additional metrics. Let's start by putting them in the right place in fetch and HTML rather than put the non-normative stuff in resource timing and then adding technical debt. Like, it's not. The WebPerf people are pretty responsive, and they help flesh out issues. Like, for example, how now we have to transfer size becomes sort of a fake. It could be issues that we can flesh out earlier. It could help. Okay. Any questions? All right. That's it then.
Thank you for that. And,
One question. So there are some differences here that will require implementations to slightly adjust what they're currently doing. So I'm wondering, more like a question for Benjamin. Were you aware of this work? Is this something you're tracking? Is it like, are you, yeah.
We're super excited to see this work. Yeah, I have definitely been tracking it, and Ane and Noam, thank you so much for this. This is definitely worth your time and effort. Yeah, we like this and want it to succeed. And clearly the right standard for this is HTML and fetch. So this is perfect. We like having all this encapsulated in one place instead of in resource timing and nap timing. So this is all great from us. You have nothing but my full support. I know last week that you had asked about app cache, Yov. So I replied in that Bugzilla about it. I mean, as part of the fetch integration, I would like some of the dangling bits like app cache to be removed or clarified. But that's not really on Noam and Ane's work. Like, that is for us, I think. I think that's cool. Do you know when the service worker bits are expected to firm up a little? Expect that in the next month?
I expect that in the next week.
Okay.
The PRs are up, and I think it's pretty solid now.
Okay. Yeah, we have been going through resource timing, WPT fails, but we're kind of hoping for this to solidify a little bit before we made another round at that. So we're expected to review nap time and resource timing after these kind of are stable enough. And it seems likely that that's either here now or will be here within 2 weeks. So
yeah, right now I'm just waiting for like IPR for service worker spec and that kind of things. But the general stuff has been reviewed already.
Yeah, I mean, timing info bits, I really like. I think that makes sense. So, is that kind of what you wanted? Like, there's only encouragement from my end as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome, thank you.
I just want to ask, do you know any changes besides the tau fail zeroed out? Any additional changes that implementers may need to be aware of in terms of like how it was behaving before?
Well, there is transfer size, which was I don't know if implementers were already doing this, but that's a change where transfer size is just encoded body size plus 300 and like it kind of just exposes cache, no cache. Other than that, I think the service worker stuff is a little bit more solidified. So, but it kind of follows implementation. I think one thing that is maybe a change and would be a bigger change once the HTML specific color bits are more in place is the previous spec did not specify at all when it is reporting done. It did for navigation timing, but not for resource timing. It said sometime after response end, it should be reported. So currently, with the only color that is fully in right now is Fetch, the Fetch API itself, and it's documented there exactly when it's reported. I don't exactly remember, but whether it's before or after the load event or whatever, but it's like, and it's going to be like that for the rest of the HTML colors. So that would be, I think, a change. I think in the Chromium implementations, there's all kinds of timers of when things are actually reported. And, the aim was that people can count on the series of events that are going to happen as a result of a resource timing entry. I think one other thing that popped up from this is that this question mark about media and resource timing. Maybe it would be good to have an issue about it. I don't know if there is one. Like there are resources that never end, like long videos, and like should they be reported? Are they resources? Maybe. Can you see them and then see the end of them just when they end, like the HTML, like the navigation timing? It's another thing that came up from doing this. Especially since response ends seem to be like the most intricate part of the measuring. I think also another thing that's a little strange in the spec, but it's not really about resource timing, it's more in the fetch itself, is that what response is not exactly defined. It's not defined how it's saved in cache. It's not defined how it's saved in the caches of a service worker. Response is kind of this opaque thing that has all kind of associated things with it. So some things are defined in fetch now, but they're still hand wavy, like how encoded body size is saved in cache. It's not really specified what it means. But question about implementation, I think those are the things for now.
I'm wondering if we should do, I don't presume you plan to add all those tests now, right? Is that correct? Right, so I wonder if we should do a testathon for the working group or something to make sure we add those tests. Because I feel like a month from now, we might not even remember what was supposed to be tested. Well, not a month from now, maybe 6 months from now. So would people be interested in helping writing up some tests, or do you think it's not that much work and someone can just do it?
I'd be supportive of running such an event for solidifying the tests around those cases. It'd be great if folks.
Yeah, this is It's just such a spec with so many things being reported, and it's we could definitely use having better test coverage, in particular for the things that just now changed. I think it's super important to have them so that implementers can double check what's the right thing to do in which cases and so on.
All right.
Thank you for going over all that with us.
Sure.
We do have a couple, let's see, we have about 15 minutes. We have a couple issues that we could dive into if we wanted. In fact, the first one that I wanted to bring up, although I think it's already mostly resolved, is one related to this resource timing issue number 260. So this is changing the current definition of start time, exposes the total redirect time when TAO fails, and Noam, you open that up. It looks like you guys have already resolved it. I guess I just want to, if you don't mind just talking about it for a moment, I just have like one clarifying question.
Mm-hmm. So
yep.
The way start time worked before was that it was the time after redirects. It was mapped to fetch start even when tau fails, which means that if one was to mark user timing before it started the fetch, tau fails, and they will get the start time for the entry and see that it's a little bit after, and it's like, oh, there's probably redirects here, so maybe that means the user was logged in, or something they can extrapolate from this. So the change that is already in the spec is that the start time is the actual start time, meaning minimum value between redirect start and fetch start, like redirect start or fetch start, basically.
And there was initially some talk about maybe gating fetch start on TAO, but it sounds like the end result is that start time will be equal to fetch start, which will be the start time. They'll both be still set.
So fetch start is for the initial fetch, not the final resource fetch, I guess.
Yeah, in the tau case, in the tau fail case.
What about the tau pass case?
In the tau pass case, there's no change to fetch start.
So it'll be the fetch start of the final resource.
The final.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a little confusing. I think we'll need some developer advice on this, because that is definitely strange change. Because it just means something different for pass versus fail. So that's not intuitive. I mean, I understand why it's done this way. Just want to highlight that it can be potentially confusing.
In the fail case, the embedder should be confused about whether it's a fetch after redirect or before. They shouldn't. It's not something they should know. So for them, as far as I know, this is a fetch without redirects, in which case fetch start would mean the same thing. I feel that's the philosophy behind it. But.
And they still won't know if there's any redirects because we're only providing two real time stamps, which is start and end. And fetch start is also basically just the same as start time. So, okay. Makes sense. I guess I just wanted to make sure that we weren't zeroing out fetch start, because that could have some compatibility issues with scripts that we're reading, specifically fetch start, if it exists in some cases. Okay, thank you. So that one, it looks like it even could be closed out once it lands into the...
It's landed.
Oh, okay, awesome.
We just need tests. Tests.
Yeah. I think I added for some of my behavior changes. I don't remember if I did for this one. Let me check. Okay.
Is that something we want to have as part of like a checklist for new changes? Is if a test is feasible to have a corresponding platform test?
Well, yeah, I think that would be nice to have. I know that at least in WebWig, in some specs, I don't know if NOM, so sometimes it says, is this change tested, right? I think in pull requests. So having that for our specs could be nice, just so that we don't forget, right? Because sometimes people just, oh, I need to fix this quickly, and then the problem of forgetting tests is that then later other implementers are like, they're unable to follow along, right? Because there's no record for them to realize that, oh, this change happened. So
I'll add a test for this one. I think there are actually tests for this that need to change in behavior to change their expected results rather than new tests. But I'll add a test for this one.
If there's tests, then that should be feasible for implementers to track from their side. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next resource timing issue is one that was opened up by Yov. This is render blocking status of resources number 262. I guess I could paste these into chat, couldn't I?
So this is basically feature requests that I thought I added years ago, but didn't. So I just added that. Essentially, I very recently added the exposure of render blocking status for scripts and styles to Chromium traces, mainly for them to be used in DevTools and Lighthouse, and now WebPage Test is also playing around with them. And that seems like a generally useful concept in order for people to know when they are loading a render blocking resource, or loading non-blocking resources before FCP, for example, and they can delay those resources to be loaded later, or otherwise see what their render blocking resources are. And it turned out that DevTools and Lighthouse were already trying to guess that, but mostly based on the type of resource and when it's loaded and its priority, which is a good estimate, but not always super accurate. So yes, I added it to traces. It seems useful initially. And I thought that this could be, like, given the fact that resource timing is now cleaned up and we can start finally, we can start to add new things to it, it might be interesting to also add that. That would, of course, involve some specification around what render blocking resource is and isn't. But yeah, it seems like a useful feature, and I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. Anyone with strong opposing or supportive opinions on, like, adding that to resource timing? Anyone that would find it useful?
From a consumer's point of view, for RUM products like mPulse, especially with how much focus our customers have on all the visual step phases of a page load, like LCP and everything, having this information to help them focus on which resources are a priority or causing concern would fit well into some of the analytics tools that we already give them to help kind of focus what they're looking at. And this would definitely be a nice way to highlight those that those resources that have an impact or would not have an impact.
Are you thinking of just having like a buffer and putting things into it, or what kind of shape are you talking about for reporting these resources?
I was more thinking of not necessarily, not a buffer of like a separate API, just as part of resource timing. So I have a resource timing entry for a script. It has a render blocking status enum that says this is non-blocking or blocking or partially blocking, because there are various subtleties to that, and ones that I'm like hoping that the implementation experience with like exposing it to traces and having it be used in Lighthouse and DevTools and web page test will give us all the different status of blocking resources. For like, we have fonts that are non-blocking, or we have fonts that are partially blocking, and yeah, so generally I thought of exposing this as part of the resource timing entry. I'm not 100% sure what the API shape would be, and this is something that I think will need some more, experience with the traces and with the different, with the different resource types. Like I said, I edited for scripts and styles. I haven't yet edited for fonts. Also, my implementation naively relied on the there's a non-blocking flag in HTML for script loading that I just reflected here, and apparently it does some weird things with when dynamic async scripts are injected. So they are considered blocking, even though they're not really blocking, but it's used like there's a Boolean in HTML there that needs to be disambiguated, and this surfaced. So I think we will need some more implementation experience before knowing exactly what the shape would be. But what I had in mind is just adding that information to resource timing.
Okay. And then I guess as you experiment, I would be curious to see if there's a value of just reporting the blocked elements and not reporting not blocked status.
Yeah. I think like right now I'm only reporting it for resources that are potentially blocking. So for images, there's no, like, it doesn't make sense to always, or maybe it does, but yeah, images, there is no blocking status. So yeah, we'll definitely discuss the API shape. Before, I just like wanted to get y'all's opinions on the usefulness of the concept.
I'm thinking that the whole render blocking thing is more like a browser choice rather than a standard thing in most cases, isn't it? Or in some cases.
I think that at least for some cases it is defined. So at least in some cases, the render rendering doesn't take place as long as there are pending head styles. I think this is specified. Benjamin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't looked at the specification status of this. I assume that at least for blocking scripts are blocking. They are defined to be blocking. For styles and render blocking, it can be slightly more ambiguous. I'm not sure.
I expect there will be some vendor-specific parts of how resources are downloaded. But I mean, if you're just looking for a show of hands, is this potentially useful? Yes, of course, this is potentially useful. We would encourage experiments in this. Hey, just a real quick point of order. We've got 3 minutes, and there's a whole bunch of calls for consensus. Can somebody say something about this? Because it looks like the action is to do nothing to approve it, which is kind of weird.
The action, so this is basically a result of the discussion from last 2 weeks. So one is a decision we made there, and yes, the action there is to do nothing. I think that for the rest, it's also similarly, if we are like, I think it's mostly we're looking for objections, and folks on the call were all supportive. So it's my understanding, and yeah, Karine is on vacation, but my understanding is, yes, that if no one objects, then we're good and we can publish and move the specs forward based on the discussion on the call.
Okay.
If there are objections, please let us know. If there are, like, you know, just questions about this, also similarly, feel free to add.
Do you mind if I just reply just to make it clear, saying I don't have any objections?
That would be awesome.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, cool.
Thank you, everybody, today for all of your discussions. And obviously, if there's follow-ups to any of these or the meeting recording stuff, let us know later. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye.